Hello, everyone. My name is Esad Yusuf Atik. I'm one of the co-creators of Citrea. Citrea is a ZK EVM rollup built on and secured by Bitcoin. Today, we're going to talk about why Bitcoin liquidity never reached applications until now. So imagine me. I'm a developer. I want to build applications that are both secured by Bitcoin and have the access to Bitcoin's liquidity. So what should I do? Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is, just go ahead, build it on Bitcoin, right? That's simple. But that's not really possible. And it's due to Bitcoin's programming being so limited. A lot of primitives that you can normally find in other programming languages or smart contract languages actually are missing. For example, you can add numbers, you can subtract numbers, but you cannot multiply two numbers. You cannot concatenate bytes, So a lot of primitives missing there. There is no state, and by state I mean, imagine I'm doing some kind of accounting on anything, right? It's a DEX. I need to save the data regarding pools so that in future transactions I can retrieve those data and, make new calculations for my users. There is no such thing in Bitcoin that allows you to do that. So there's no state. So Bitcoin people like to use a complicated, in my opinion, word for this third item right here, cannot enforce how Bitcoin will be spent. Bitcoin people call it covenants. And what that means is, imagine I send you some funds, and I somehow enforce you to do certain things with those funds. That's not possible. So that means all of these combined, I cannot build tokens, I cannot build decentralized exchanges, I cannot build DeFi applications or any type of application we see on Ethereum. Okay, so what's my next option? Of course, my next option would be to use bridged BTC on secondary layers. This has been tried many times. Liquid, Rootstock, I can't really name more now, but every attempt we had until very recently actually relied on trusted federations, such as multisig's. For example, Rootstock has a 5 of 9 multisig. You're basically depositing your money to their multisig and expecting them to mint, and also to let your withdrawal pass. We have Liquid, which has a trusted federation of, again, like 9 members, and withdrawals are permissioned. You cannot withdraw anytime. With that in mind, none of these bridges or layers were actually secured by Bitcoin. And what does secured by Bitcoin mean? That means they're not settling on Bitcoin. They're just, handling the funds. The actual verification goes on in their nodes. None of these attempts contributed back to Bitcoin too. And what that means is paying fees in Bitcoin so that you're contributing to the security of Bitcoin. Because when you're contributing to the miner economy, you're contributing to the security of the chain. So that resulted in users not trusting it. Bitcoin bridges to secondary layers were not really popular. And that's due to the security trades-off with the multisigs. Some of these side layers also had different VMs, for example, Stacks. It has a bridge of STX stakers. It has a custom VM called Clarity VM. You cannot build, you cannot deploy Solidity smart contracts there. That killed the momentum for that chain because now developers coming to build on Stacks, they need to learn a completely new VM plus a completely new language. So with all of these combined, no users, if there's no users, there's not going to be much liquidity. If there's not going to be liquidity, you're not really inclined to build newer applications for those chains. So there's not much apps either. So why now? Why are we talking about all of these? And why do we think, newer Bitcoin-aligned infrastructure is on the way? So there's been developments in all of these 3 items. For example, in zero-knowledge technology, ZK VMs have become so much more efficient. They become much easier to use, especially in rollups. There's been developments in Bitcoin in the last years, SegWit upgrade followed by Taproot, and now BitVM. So SegWit update increased Bitcoin block size from 1 megabyte to 4 megabytes. Taproot brought in new scripting paradigms, basically, which made it easier to put data on chain. Plus, it's opened the ways for development of BitVM. So, and I'll talk about BitVM more, but in short, BitVM is kind of a black box that allows you to verify any kind of computation on Bitcoin. Then, we have basically UX readiness. Crypto world in the past few years has made new improvements to how wallets work with account abstraction. EVM tooling has gotten even better. It's really easy to deploy and maintain any kind of application. So, with all of these in mind, we believe a new Bitcoin application layer should have these three properties. It should have EVM as its VM, and that's because we want to be able to let developers use existing tools they know, let them deploy existing applications they know how to deploy and maintain. Secondly, you want Bitcoin applications, BAPs, to be secured by Bitcoin. And third of all, you want BTC on your chain to be secured by Bitcoin network. And we do that through a BitVM-based bridge we name Clementine. Clementine's rules are enforced by Bitcoin as long as there is at least one honest party present. So that's not actually trustless, it's trust minimized. But with updates we'd like to see in the future in Bitcoin, we can make it trustless. Anyway, so when you can achieve all these three properties listed here, we believe you are fundamentally creating a new category of applications. These BAPs will be the first and only applications that are secured by the Bitcoin network. For the first time in Bitcoin layer's history, these applications will contribute back to Bitcoin security, not just rely on Bitcoin security. And that's due to the one of the unique properties of Citrea. Any transaction you do on Citrea will end up paying fees on Bitcoin. And I'll talk about that a little later. And of course, BAP's liquidity comes from a bridge that is actually verified on Bitcoin. So anything you do in Clementine is going to end up being verified by Bitcoin. And that basically powers the BAPs, right? So let's talk about what happened in the technology so that we can do all of these and create this new category of applications called BAPs. So zero knowledge technology, I talked about zkVMs being developed much more now, but just to go through how it works, a zk proof is a small cryptographically verifiable piece of data that any verifier can take and verify in constant time or sometimes logarithmic time, independent of the size of the computation. So a small analogy is, there's a lot of transactions going on with lots of digital signatures. Instead of verifying all of them, I can prove them in a zk circuit or a zkVM, create a single zk proof to be verified to acknowledge another party about what happened in these transactions. So what we do is take some transactions, run them through our zk circuits, compress them, and send them back to Bitcoin. So send them back to Bitcoin, you may ask. So Citrea uses Bitcoin as a data availability layer. So imagine this Bitcoin block. We explained we use it for settlement when talking about Clementine. But we also use it for data availability. So what happens in Citrea is not that much different from other Ethereum rollups that we are used to. There's a sequencer publishing blocks. Some amount of time passes. There is a prover. We call it batch prover, but that's not really important. Groups L2 blocks together, runs them in a zk circuit, creates the output, which is the ZK proof, and the state diff that that's created by all of those L2 blocks. And the prover sends that to the A, that yellow square, basically. And how do we do that? Well, this is something that's been popularized by Ordinals protocol, if you ever heard about it. Around 2 years ago, some group of people put out Ordinals. It's a clever way of using taproot scripts, well, actually tricking Bitcoin into storing data. It looks something like this. You can basically write any kind of data you want, but you're limited by the Bitcoin block size, which is 4 megabytes. Anyways, that's an example of Ordinals. The first thing they use it for is, of course, NFTs. People started spamming Bitcoin with lots of pictures. This is called Dode monkeys. At the time, we were working on another project regarding Ordinals, and we realized, with almost all these data availability, we could maybe build a rollup. So that's how I ended up here. So if you want to see how much data we are using, this is citrea.usage.com. We show how much data we posted to Bitcoin testnet 4 from Citrea testnet. Usually we use about 0.5% of available block space in a day, but lately we've been doing some testing, and a few days ago we pushed like 80 megabytes of data, which is something really scares lots of Bitcoin people, let's say. But yeah. So okay, we pushed a lot of data to Bitcoin, but nothing has been verified yet. What are we going to do with all this data? So that's where Citrea Light Client proofs come in. We create another ZK circuit, which basically goes over all Bitcoin blocks in a given header chain, scans for Citrea proofs, verify those ZK proofs inside ZK again, and basically create a much smaller version of Citrea proofs that only includes the Bitcoin header we're on and Citrea straight root. So that way, you're basically mapping a point in Bitcoin's header chain to Citrea's state. So given any Bitcoin block, you know what Citrea's state is. Of course, by verifying the light client proof. Okay, so again, we got the light client proof. Nothing has been verified on Bitcoin yet, right? So that's where Clementine and BitVM come into play. So let's talk about BitVM a little bit. So I was actually going to talk about this, but I accidentally skipped the first slide and I played along. So just to mention it again, Bitcoin block space is 4 megabytes, right? Bitcoin script is very limited. So if you want to create any kind of ZK verifier, the smallest we could go was 800 megabytes. So how will you run a script, that is 800 megabytes inside a 4 megabyte block? That's not going to happen. That's against the consensus rules, right? So BitVM2 is actually a very clever way to overcome this challenge. So what you do is you chop up your ZK verifier into, let's say, 4 megabyte pieces, right? Then you have 20 pieces. All of the parties involved in the BitVM setup, know these pieces. And BitVM actually verifies ZK proofs optimistically. So that means whenever somebody claims something wrong, someone else comes into play and challenges that actor and says, hey, you're claiming a dishonest thing, and now that claim has to be, answered on chain. The way you're doing that is you commit into, you commit the intermediary steps into those 4 megabyte chunks of your ZK proofs. That takes much less space than the 800 megabytes you were supposed to push, right? And then the other parties can check those intermediary values and find where that other party is being dishonest. And what happens is you send a disprove transaction that shows on-chain, and runs the part of that ZK verifier on-chain, with the intermediary values. And if there's something wrong, the other guy is burnt. So that's BitVM, right? What we get is an optimistically verified ZK proof system. So we We built Clementine on top of BitVM too. So remember, I mentioned one of the challenges. So there were a few challenges with building applications on Bitcoin. So, one of them was scripting was really hard. The other one was there were no covenants. And covenants meant you cannot enforce how a a fund is spent in the future, right? So to overcome that challenge, BitVM itself is not enough. BitVM is just a primitive there used for ZK verification. So you have to create games, basically. In Clementine, this game is played between different actors called operators and signers. There's challengers and whatnot, but I'm not going to talk about that. And it looks something like this. So this talk will not go through, of course, this transaction list. But what happens is you got an N of N multisig. So everybody has to sign. Everybody has to play along, right? You create such a transaction graph, such a line of transactions that nobody can really cheat. Everybody has to act in a certain way. All of the possible ways things can go are signed beforehand. And that plus BitVM to disprove and challenge people gives you a much more secure Bitcoin bridge than anything we've seen before. So this construction takes in Citrea-like client proof to actually resolve those disputes. And that's how you get Bitcoin to verify Citrea. So since I'm running out of time, I'll just go skip these steps, but it's just illustrations showing how that disprove stuff regarding BitVM happens. Basically, maybe just to go over these two slides. So you commit to intermediary values of the ZK verifier. When there is a challenge, somebody says, hey, show me what's going on, right? And then you do a disprove transaction showing where exactly somebody was dishonest, and then you fix that, you finish that challenge, and somebody's burned, they lose money. Anyway, so you want to learn about Clementine and BitVM and bridging to Citrea. You can learn about it on our white paper at Citrea XYZ Clementine white paper PDF. There's a link there. So yeah, we do all of these for one thing that we like to call BAPS framework. You got Bitcoin, which has $2 trillion, more than $2 trillion actually, sitting idle, with 17 years of running, no downtime, very sound money, You got your application layer, that's Citrea, that's relying on Bitcoin security, that has a trust minimized bridge to Bitcoin, which brings in Bitcoin into a smart contract platform, which is EVM compatible. It's actually I guess, equivalent, I'm not sure. And then you open up the ways for devs to come in and deploy BAPS. So as people deploy more BAPS, there's more on-chain utility. There will be more users with more capital. Since this chain is not actually doing a vampire attack on Bitcoin, you're paying back fees to Bitcoin, right? You're actually supporting Bitcoin security. You got more users and capital. I mentioned that. That brings in more developers to build more BAPS, and that's a flywheel, basically. So we're right now in testnet. We are pushing really hard to go to mainnet. I want to talk about a few of our existing applications that you can go ahead and use on testnet today. We got Selfie. It's an SMS-based DeFi platform. It's really interesting. We got Crest. Crest is a really easy-to-use OTC trading platform. We got Nectra. It's Bitcoin-backed stable coins. There's Satsuma. They want to be the liquidity. So it's a DEX. They want to be the liquidity platform of Citrea. We got Signals. It's a different approach to prediction markets. It's about Bitcoin prices, but they have something different. Tanari, it's an account abstraction wallet application for Citrea. They want to be the easiest way to use Bitcoin, both in your payments and your investments. We also got Zentra Finance. Unfortunately, I don't really remember what they do, so I'll just skip. So testnet's live, mainnet soon. If you want to learn more about Citrea, please give us a follow on our X or on our website. Yeah, thanks.